Hello, I'm Jim Miller. I'm here with Ron Bowers and Henry House. The Flip Side starts right now. Welcome to the show. We're pleased to have with us tonight Bernadette Wagner. Bernadette is the host of a TV show that's produced in cooperation with Antietam Broadband. It's called Prime Time for Women. Welcome, Bernadette.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So I'm sure all three of us have lots of questions for you.
Okay.
But first of all, talk a little bit about just the show and your inspiration for the show.
Right. So Prime Time for Women is a show, but it's a little bit broader than that. It is hopefully a whole community-wide program. And so the mission of Prime Time for Women is to celebrate, connect, and empower women from diverse backgrounds as they explore new possibilities in the second half of life. And so we have the show. That is our centerpiece project. And we tape a live TV show one Saturday a month. But we also have workshops and meetups and a very active, robust online community, all geared to support and empower and encourage women in the second half of life.
And you actually have a live TV audience when you shoot the show, so people could actually get tickets if they wanted to.
That's right, and our next show is on July 20th, good lead-in. But you know, part of the reason that we have a live TV audience is because the research underlying Prime Time for Women says that women are healthier, happier, and stronger when they're in social relationships, when they're well connected with others. In fact, the research says that if you have strong social networks, you have less incidences of diabetes, depression, dementia, certain kinds of cancer. People living in isolation, according to the research, carry the same health risk as somebody who smokes 15 cigarettes a day. Yikes, wow. Right? That's crazy. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is to give women an opportunity to come together. And this is true of men too, but you know, really, I'm in my 60s and I'm looking to where I'm going and where I can make a difference. I think for a long time, women have sort of known intuitively that when I get together with my girlfriends, I feel better, I'm happier, I laugh more. But right now, at this time in our culture, we have the ability to do research. We can look at CAT scans and see what happens to women's brains when they are in social relationship. And what happens is parts of the brain light up. There are 17 neurochemicals that are released that John Cacioppo, who is a neuroscientist, says creates an immunity shield. In particular, he looks at dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. And so when you're in relationship, when you're talking, when you're making that eye contact, when you're touching somebody, you create this little chemical cocktail that is health protective and particularly fights against diseases that are caused by chronic diseases that are caused by inflammation, and most chronic diseases have some sort of inflammatory process going on. And so there's a woman named Susan Pinkert. She writes for The Guardian. She's a psychologist and a journalist, and she says that we can be each other's best medicine. And I love that. Just by getting together and being in relationship, we can be healthier and happier. And that is the goal of Prime Time for Women, to bring women together from diverse backgrounds, because that being with people from diverse backgrounds is particularly pertinent to a positive social interaction.
Neat. Henry?
You have the live show. You do once a month, I believe.
Right.
And you mentioned about having other community activities.
Right.
Which I'm sure the live show helps advertise and get the word out. Can you talk about some of the other community activities that complement the show that you do?
Sure. So we've hosted a book club, and you know, we're looking to do that again. We have a woman coming on our show in August. Her name is Abby Maslin, and she's written a book called Love You Hard. When her husband, you might remember, her husband was severely injured coming home from a Nationals game a couple years ago and suffered severe brain damage. And I invited her on the show because she wrote this book about, I think the subtitle of the book is Love You Hard, a journey of brain damage and redefining love and starting life over, or something like that. And she is not in the second half of life in terms of age, but she had to she is in the second half of her life. She says, this event happened, my life was that before, and now this is my life after. And it's this beautiful story of her overcoming and supporting her husband through his medical traumas and sustained injuries, and how they've come to this new point in life and moving forward. And so she's going to be coming on the show, and we're looking to do a book club around that book as well.
Okay, interesting.
We also hosted on our first show, we had Angela Petrie, who owns this company called Bellissima Belly Dancing. And she did a workshop for us, and it was just tons of fun. And so what I'm looking for the women in our community, I hope they hear this loud and clear, if there's an interest that you have, let me know, because I'll put a workshop together around your interest. I try really hard to say I host the show, but the show is not about me. It's for and about the women in our community, and I say that every single show. So your ideas matter, your suggestions of who you want to see on the show, let me know, send them to me.
So to follow on to that, so what I'm hearing, which is something frankly I didn't know, and I've been at every show at this point, but what you're saying is the events are really driven by the current needs, the current issues, the current wants of your audience and those who communicate with you.
Right, and so, some of the ideas are my ideas, but I mean, also, we are really open to, one of the things that Meredith is now sponsoring our show, and I met last week with some of the people in Mary Risk's office, and one of the things I talked with her about doing is starting a walking club, maybe at Meredith, and inviting some of the physicians there to walk with us, because one of the things we know is people don't do what doctors tell them to do. Kids don't do what their parents tell them to do. Kids do what they see their parents doing, right? I mean, I tell my kids, clean your room, but if my room's a pig pen, they're not going to clean that. I mean, I'm just saying, honestly. So, the idea is that we need to look to our experts to not just tell us what to do, but to do it with us, to build that positive relationship, to see them not just as physicians, but also people in our community. And it was really great to be able to have the chance to talk to Mary Risk about this. And one of the things she said was that Meredith is now looking forward to start this primary care residency program, and she said this might be a very good fit. So I can't wait to go back and talk with her further about that idea.
Let me take you back a couple of years.
Okay.
Because where you are now, you're in a total different place in life, age-wise, probably third career.
Or fifth, or
at least.
And that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Right,
well,
right.
But she stays on top of her game, what she's doing. You go back to the school board. You go back to days where you were an elected official. She had to run as an elected, to be elected. And you were elected, what, twice or three times?
Twice.
Twice. And she did really well. And you did really well in the school board. How is what you learned then and what you are doing now, how have you determined what some of the problems that women, that you can bring out now that you wouldn't have known years ago?
Well, right. So we're all evolving as we age, right? And I would say from what I learned when I was on the school board, I certainly made lots of connections with other elected officials, with agencies, with governmental agencies, nonprofits. And that positioned me very well to see what our nonprofit industries were doing and in our community. And actually, when I left the school board, Roxanne Ober and I established Volunteer Washington County. And we worked with nonprofits and bringing people into the community to volunteer, but not just saying, I want to volunteer, really providing here is a big place for a nonprofit to say, this is our need, and people can go on and say, oh, I can look at 535 nonprofits, and then I know what I want to be able to participate in. But and that actually dovetails very nicely with what I'm doing, because volunteers, they experience better health, they have better sense of well-being, they have less depression. So this idea that volunteering was healthy certainly informed me going forward with
How much do you have to get into being voluntold?
Yeah, so I think that the research says that what's healthy for us is relationships that are participatory, informative, reciprocal, a give and take, and build what's called social cohesion, the sense that you belong to something bigger than yourself, something bigger than your immediate family. And that connection is what Prime Time for Women really is trying to do. It's a big part of why we do a live TV show, because I really believe to feel like you're part of a group, you need to be seen and heard. And women have a higher social satisfaction score when they feel like they're not invisible, which is what a lot of women say over 50, that they feel invisible. So we have the cameras on the audience. We give them opportunities to interact with our guests, and it's intentional so that they feel like they belong there and that they have something to share and offer.
One of the things that I noticed about the show, and two main pieces that I really like about the show. Number one, the guests are often amazing.
They are.
And I got to tell you, as the white male in the audience, or actually I'm not in the audience, but running the projector, I learned something from every one of your shows. But the other thing that strikes me is the research-based material that you bring. And, you know, we're fortunate on this show. There's no shortage of media outlets reporting the things or talking about the things that we want to talk about. So the information gathering is very, very easy for us. Putting a show like yours together doesn't happen in a half an hour or an hour. How do you research this? How do you find, other than people calling in, how do you find all of these research? You sat here tonight and you've had, 5 or 6 or 7 quotes and statistics that are just blowing my mind.
Well, part of it is,
that?
this is really, okay, so I'm a little bit of a health nerd, a nut, my kids used to say, but it's fascinating to me. So I do read a lot on this topic, and I actually, when I'm getting ready to look for a particular guest, I do an in-depth research on that. So we are going to be having in July a woman named Debbie Fling. She started Save Our Children to address the opioid epidemic. I asked her particularly to be on the show because we all know statistics about opioid, but what Debbie's going to bring to the show is the sense that she herself is a mom, a proud mom, who's living and loving a child that is in addiction. And this idea that when we keep these stories hidden, when there's shame involved, we as a county, as a community, as a country, we're not addressing because we're hiding, we're not shining any light on this issue. And so she says what we need to do is to say, this is me, this is what's going on in my life, who's going to join me? And I think almost everybody in our community, if not in their family, in their neighborhood, and if not in their neighborhood, at their church, we all know somebody who's dealing with addiction. We want to give women an opportunity to say, you're not alone, Debbie Fling, I'm not alone. We're actually, if people are watching, we're looking for people to send pictures to us that we'll show on our show of those that you love that are dealing with addiction. Kind of take away the demonization of addiction and really begin to say, through this coming together and an understanding of what you're going through, we can heal those who are healing or working to heal those that are addicted.
So talk about what they've gone through, not be lectured to.
Right. So there's this quote. I did actually write it down to share with you today. Let's see, there's a guy named Tommy Orange, and he wrote a novel called There, There. And let's see, he says, he says, in his novel, he says, when you hear stories from people like you, you feel less alone. When you feel less alone and like you have a community of people behind you, I believe you can live a better life. And my take on that, when I speak on this topic, I say, by listening to the stories of others, we come to know ourselves better. Sometimes when we have a story, we hide from it. It's like not pretty, it's not, I grew up with an alcoholic family. For a long time, I didn't talk about that. My dad was an alcoholic. And it's amazing when I say that, people go, oh, you had that? I had that. And then I hear their story and I go, that casts a little bit of light back on me. So this idea in sharing what we're going through, that we're not alone, that we can have this healing just by sharing our humanity.
Wow. So we have more questions, but we're out of time.
Okay.
On this block. Can we ask you to stay around for another block?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Stay tuned. When we come back, Bernadette and the FlipSide is back. We're back after the break. Welcome back. Well, once again, we're here with Bernadette Wagner, host of Prime Time for Women, and I now feel like I'm undervaluing saying host for Prime Time for Women, because it's much more than that.
Yeah, but that is the visible part. But I hope that people check out our website.
Which is what?
primetimeforwomen4.com.
Okay,
Primetime, yeah.
So we talked about inspiration, we talked about goals, we talked about the live studio audience. Let's talk about the issues.
Right.
If you had in your mind, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you. Tell us the top 3 or 5 issues that you see, and then Ron and Henry and I may have some questions along the way.
Okay, so social isolation, which I told you is really dangerous for all people. And right now, social scientists and researchers are terming this time in our culture the loneliness epidemic, or the loneliness crisis. And there's a higher incidence of suicide than ever before. There's a higher incidence of opioid addiction. And so they believe that a lot of this is being driven by loneliness. And so what causes that loneliness? Well, one of the things that's really interesting that the research says, technology, which was meant to connect us to everybody, it does connect information, but it doesn't connect on a biologic level. It does not create an immunity shield. You know, in my local food store now, I can go to my computer, I can order food, I can drive up, somebody can put my food in the car. I don't have to speak to anybody if I don't want to. And that's supposed to be a good thing. Well, just not too long ago in the Washington Post, there was an article in the Washington Post that said, the title was, even weak social interactions are beneficial. And in the article it said, chit-chatting with your checkout clerk has health protective benefits. But we're taking that away. Right. So the idea is, you know, to look at what's causing social isolation. Another big thing that women face is ageism. The World Health Organization says ageism is the most prevalent form of discrimination, more so than sexism or racism. And that's because nobody even knows about it. They don't even get that there's ageism.
So define ageism.
Ageism is discrimination towards a person based on age. Or
perceived age.
Or perceived age.
Because we can't ask that in a job interview.
Right. But it's not just in the business world. It's, kids as young as 3 say, this is what old looks like, cranky, blah, blah. They have this whole list of things. And people, dependent, cantankerous, curmudgeon. Yeah, there's all these, women are hags or, whatever, shrews. There's these terms that people use to describe older people, shuffling. The idea that people, they use this term, a cultural portal. And I always think of like Harry Potter and the port keys where you touch that and you get somewhere. We go to this cultural portal and we go, if you're 55 and somebody says, now when you're 55, women can't have long hair or women can't dress a certain way or women are not sexual beings. That's like saying, okay, I'm transporting myself into that other world. No, that is just ridiculous. And the only way to fight ageism is to highlight people who have not chosen to go into the cultural portal, who are not choosing to follow the cultural expectations. We have a woman coming up on our show, I think in August, Darcy Easton. I had the privilege of meeting with her. She, to celebrate her 80th birthday, she went skydiving. I mean, I just love it. I can't wait to show that on the show. I on our Facebook page, yesterday I posted this woman, she's 78 years old, and she is still dancing point ballet on the West Coast. I mean, it's amazing. She's still teaching and dancing professionally at 78. Yeah, it's not the norm, but maybe it's not the norm because we've been telling people, oh, you can't do that. And people go, oh, okay. I can't do that. I mean, I think the best way, when I do my presentations, I talk about rewriting the script, and I say, anything that you do that makes people say, I can't believe she just did that, or I can't
Yeah,
believe.
but you got to be a certain age to do that.
What do
You
you mean?
can't be way younger than you are and do that. You're doing by example. So
Right.
you can pull these folks along by example because of what you want to do. So there again, it gets back to
Yeah, but so like Ron, one of the things that Prime Time for Women does is we definitely seek to support women supporting women. That's what we talk about all the time. And when we originally started this project, it was going to be for women 50 and over. And I never say 50 and older. That's not it. 50 and over, or level 50. But the average age that women start businesses in the U.S. is 40 years of age. And so we said no, because we want to support these young female entrepreneurs. And so we try to highlight them on our TV show. Most shows we have one entrepreneur. We're also starting, if you go to our Facebook page, on Monday we do Mindful Monday. And I think I have 7 different women who are doing life coaching or yoga instruction or health and fitness teaching, and they lead a little 15 to 20 minute session. I get to introduce them to our community, and if people want to find and connect with them and pursue their services later, that's great. But in the meantime, they're providing content that enriches the community of women and men. Yeah, I mean, the last couple times I've come back from running, instead of doing my regular stretching, I pull up my little Prime Time for Women Facebook page, and I do the yoga class that she did with me 2 weeks ago. But this idea is we have a lot to celebrate. The women in our community have a lot to offer, and who's going to give them an opportunity? Who's going to give them exposure
you
on TV?
because
Me.
you've been through it.
Me.
You're bringing them along because you're an example.
But there can be examples at a younger age, too. I look at some things that my daughter does that her peers are then looking at and saying, wow, that's kind of cool. And I take credit for some of those.
Right.
Just to be clear. But the point is that I think you can be an example at any age. And I think we see examples of that all the time. And certainly, I know we're talking about women, but men too.
Men too.
The former coach at HCC, not Brown, the athletic director, you know who I'm talking about. Anyway,
Bill Myers.
Bill Myers, thank you. He was my daughter wanted to get into pole vaulting, and we were out there, and this was a while back, and Bo was trying to get these kids at this pole vaulting clinic to do a handstand against the wall. And then I don't know what all was involved with it. Well, Bo's 60 plus years old at the time, and they're all standing there, not able to do it. And finally, he just puts down his clipboard and says, let me show you.
Right.
And there he goes. And for the next 15 minutes, he's standing on his head, talking to these girls about how this works and why we do it and how we do it. And
then they could probably do it too, because they were inspired to do it.
They were absolutely inspired.
But see, this is why she is good at it. She's been good at everything she's done. She comes out and she does so many things, and she pulls so many people with her.
Yes.
And that's the issue that a lot of things. Go to a doctor. I want to go to a doctor that's going to tell me what to do, and the guy's obese. The
Right.
guy couldn't run
But I'll
20
tell you
feet.
what I want to do is get into some of our medical practices and share with some of our physicians what the research says about positive social interactions as a way of dealing with some of the symptoms and diseases that their clients are or their patients have. So I understand that they're not going to say, don't take your medicine, go find a place where you can volunteer or where you can connect with somebody. But in addition to taking the medicine, look for ways to be engaged. Look for ways that you can have this positive feedback that creates an immunity shield for your body. And it is true, it's not just for women. The same research applies to men. And I have said on the TV show, the show is for and about women, but not only. And you know, I say it's for men who, in particular, who understand that women have accomplished a lot but aren't done yet. For men who like feisty women, for men who get and understand that their lives are enriched as they enrich other people too. So there's a lot of opportunities I would encourage men to come to the show as well, because everything we do there is entertaining. Jim enjoys it. My husband likes coming to the show.
Now, you've kept us a secret. Why? How come you never told us?
I'm sorry, Ron. It's not about me.
Well, let me ask you a question, because, you know, in life, people say, oh, well, you're too old to do this. Okay, not often do you hear, you know, growing up, well, you're too young for this,
Yeah.
okay, unless it involves driving or something like that. But, as you're entering the second half of your life, more obstacles get presented. Well, you're too old to start a business, or you're too old to start a family, or so your show is addressing those issues of, oh, I'm not too.
Right. And I would say when somebody says you're too old, I would say, you don't know me. And I think everybody has that power to define what they look like at a certain age. So, for example, one of the stories I shared on the show was somebody at my gym said, "How old are you?" And I said, not at all. Now, but if you want to know my age, I'm 61 and I'm in my prime of my life, and I hope that you get to be in your prime at whatever age. I hope I'm still in my prime of life at 89. But, the idea is old is a perception, and we have the power through our self-stories and through the stories that we hear from other people to change. And that's why I'm highlighting different women on my show who have said, I'm not going through that cultural portal. There was I don't know if anybody saw, Washington Post and Sunday had an 8-page spread on the Outlook section, and it was just celebrating women starting careers after 50. And I sent a letter to every single one of those women. I actually contacted the reporter that put it together at the Washington Post, Jenny Rogers. Hi, Jenny, if you're watching. And I said, can you get this to all of those women? Today, I heard back from this woman who was a 32-year school teacher who's now doing stand-up comedy. And she said, yes, I want to be on Primetime for Women. And I'm like, yes, I can't wait to have her on my show. Mm-hmm. So this idea that not only does she have something to share, but she can inspire just by saying, at 32, I'm retiring from teaching, but that doesn't mean I'm done yet. I've got lots left to learn.
Well, there's mental, societal, and some physical barriers as all of us age that we have to overcome. Now, if we say, oh, well, I'm just going to sit in the lazy boy, I'm going to watch the sunset a few more years and life is over, that's your choice. But there's the opportunity if you approach it with an open mind.
Yeah, so, and that is true. I'm not naive to saying that as you age that there aren't some physical limitations. I mean, but I also think that the research out of the Ohio longitudinal study of aging and retirement says that people who have a positive perception of aging, a positive outlook about aging, live 7.5 years longer than those who have a negative perception. So if you have a negative perception on aging, you might sit around more. And the more you sit around, the more you're going to sit around. Absolutely. Right? So there's this cyclical thing to it. But there's also a cyclical energy that comes from saying, no, I'm not going to not do this. I'm going to do it. And then you're like, damn, can I say that? Damn, I did it, now, what else am I going to do? So we had a woman, Barb Spencer, on our show. She was obese. And we kind of highlighted her on the show because she went from being obese to somewhat fit to being super fit to competing in bodybuilding competitions in her 60s. I mean, that's the kind of thing. I'm not talking about Barb's body. I'm talking about the self-messaging that she's saying to herself. I can do this. I don't have to be here today and there tomorrow, but I can take little teeny steps. And what I accomplish here, can I do more? I would say that we all have that power to do that.
But where does she find her support staff? Somebody has to support you. A lot of times families don't support people that want to do it.
She had a personal trainer, but she's a nurse practitioner, and she had a ton of information, and she goes, and she did say, how can I talk to my patients if I'm not doing what I'm saying?
And sometimes when you ignite the spark, the self-motivation carries you a long way.
But you have to really be motivated.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And anything that we do, if you want to stay at it, you have to stay motivated. You're always motivated. You're always upbeat. How do you do that?
And I have my moments, but everybody does. But I think naturally, I'm an optimistic person, but I have, I'm married to the love of my life for almost 40 years. I mean, how can you go wrong there? I have 5 beautiful children, and they have wonderful spouses, and now I have 3 lovely grandchildren. I have a lot to be grateful for, a lot to be happy about. But I would say that, Ron, I think that one of the things that motivates me is the energy I get from other people. It's why I think that when I started reading this research, it didn't surprise me. I am happier when I am in relationship, when I am engaged, when I have a chance to talk. And that's what I want people to know. You know, I did want to tell you one other little research, just talking about people being isolated and needing that physical contact in that relationship. There was a group of high school girls. They were all seniors competing in a math competition. And they measured the cortisol level, which is a stress hormone. And all the girls' cortisol levels were off the charts. You know, they were anxious, they were nervous. And one quarter of and all the girls competed. And one quarter of the girls, when they came off the stage, their mothers were there to greet them and hug them and say, "You did a great job." One quarter of the girls, their mothers called them and spoke to them and said, "Congratulations, honey, you were terrific." One quarter of the girls got a text message from their mother, and one quarter of the girls didn't have any feedback at all. So I don't know what you think the research would say, but you want to take a guess?
I would say the person that didn't get any text or anything did well. I was one of those people that didn't get calls, didn't get the hugs, didn't get that thing, and worked way harder to succeed in life than having somebody there when you walked off the stage.
And see, I would say exactly opposite. I would say the cortisol level following would have decreased more quickly in those that got the hug, that got the phone, that got the text, you know, kind of.
What do you think, Henry?
I'm in Jim's corner.
So it's interesting. Maybe from a motivational point of view, because you didn't get that, like you're like, okay. But the cortisol level dropped precipitously for the young girls whose moms were there. For the girls who got a phone call, it dropped a little bit, but it was
Not
attenuated. It was greatly attenuated. The girls who got a text message, no drop in cortisol level at all. It was exactly the same as the girls that got no feedback. So when I say to my kids, pick up the darn phone and at least call me, don't text me, you know, I'm talking health benefits here.
So back to the one last question, we're way over on time, and thank you for staying, but the social isolation piece.
Right.
One of the things that I was wondering about, and see if you have any statistics, but the whole concept of work from home. We know that one of our big employers in Washington County is migrating their workforce to be a work-at-home workforce. And a lot of businesses are doing that. Our government's doing that. Socially, there's a lot that happens at work
Right.
when we go into the office or the wherever we go to work. What are your thoughts? What does your research indicate on that?
I haven't read specifically on work at home, but my guess would be that it's why there's such an outcropping of shared space, workspace. And I know down here at University of Maryland System, they have a shared workspace that people can rent, you pay a fee and you can use that space in there. And I think that would be beneficial. I know on the days that I don't have anybody, if I'm just working from home and my husband's gone, I cannot wait for him to get home. And he'll walk in the door and he'll say, "Oh, you didn't go anywhere today." And I'm like, "Yeah," you know, it's not a happy day for me. Yeah. So I actually try to make something in my schedule so that I have some contact throughout the day. And I'm sure that there's different levels of people needing contact. Some people are more introverted, some people are more extroverted, but I do.
Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Yeah.
No.
I'd say you're an introvert.
Good one, Ron. Yeah. So I feel like I think that. To me, though, one of the things I wanted to say, in Washington County, 49.9% of the female population is over 40, 36.2% of the female population is over 50. So women tend to live longer than men, so they have a greater risk of being outliving their spouses if they have a spouse or partner. They also, with kids my kids, I have 5 kids, not one of them lives locally. You know, I work hard at seeing my grandkids, but I also have adopted the little kids next door. They come over and ring my doorbell and say, "Can you come out and play?" I love it. But, you know, I guess to me, the idea is that we have you know, risk factors built into our culture that affect women. So the outliving men, you know, I go to different groups to talk, and I would say 80% of the people at the senior groups are women. You know, 80 women to 20 men. Wow. And that's maybe has to do with women doing a better job of being connected throughout their lives than men. So I would say to men in the audience, you know, this is important. I know one of the things that made me most ridiculously happy was when my husband turned 60. We gave him a party, and he's really into poetry, so everybody wrote him poems. And he stood up to thank everybody, and he promised that, he said, going forward, I will be a better friend. I will reach out to you. He said, I've seen what it's done for my wife and how it's benefited her in her relationships, and I want to have that in my life. And he has. He has done a great job of that, and I think he's better for it.
Thanto you for being here.
Sure,
we
thank you.
appreciate it. This
Yeah.
was enlightening, to say the least.
This is going to be the first time. There's got to be another time. Because I want her to come back and we get into some real issues.
Will you come back and see us again?
I sure will. I would love to
Excellent.
do that. Thank you so
All right,
much.
up next, Fast Five. Stay with us. We're back in about 3 minutes.
So
Welcome back, and welcome to Fast Five, where our 3 panelists talk about 5 topics in 7 short minutes. Let's start it off. Ron, I know this one is near and dear to your heart. Hagerstown is considering revisions to the utility policy. Is this something you've talked about before, once or twice?
Probably 25 years. And I think it's something that will come to fruition.
So tell me what they're proposing, and then tell me in your view, because you do have a little bit of experience on this, tell me in your view what should happen.
Right now they're looking at one property primarily out next to Citibank.
A hotel.
On
Hotel.
a site that's owned by the Washington County Industrial Foundation chief, which has sold that piece of property. They're looking to get water there and sewer, of course. Mm-hmm. But prior to that, Citibank, 3 buildings and a daycare center is there, plus all of the airport is there, and there's the Erie Insurance Building there, and there is room for plenty more business. And they want to determine and make a decision based on just one business. That is totally not the way to solve an issue that has been created.
They're making the decision on revising based on one business? Is that what you're saying?
They're making a decision revised on where it is and how much.
But this revision that they're talking about, is that based just on one business, or
Yes,
is that
it's on one business.
Or is that saying that, wow, we've got a potential issue here, let's rethink this and
Everybody knows it's an issue.
Okay. What is the issue?
The issue is, and I've said it repeatedly over the years, the issue is the county areas getting water. Without water, you can't build. Turning down a new development because you can't get water, and in this particular time it's a hotel, they can make a revision and change it, and they can get water and they can build. But what's happening to the rest of the area around it and around the airport? It should all be dealt with in one fell swoop. The county and the city should meet and be able to solve the issue. I see a couple city council folks, new ones, that's going to see it different. Councilman Alshire, he sees it in a different way. That why should the city allow the county to build in an area that the city don't think they should build? But first of all, I don't think that the city should have total control of where water goes in Washington County, but they have the plant. And they say they don't have the ability, or their plant's not sized enough to provide water to every place the county wants to go.
Henry, what's your take on this?
Well, Ron, on your point, doesn't the city and county have different development zones? Our maps are not aligning where the city would like to see development occur versus where the county's future plans of development is. I mean, that's part of the issue with the site near the airport. The hotel's asking for about 1,000 gallons of use a day.
Right.
But there's 2 other potential sites that haven't been discussed that are looking to use 5,000.
In a different area.
In a different area, but 5,000, and that's not raising any eyebrows. So I don't understand why the city council and our county commissioners can't get their stewards to communicate to one another and come up with a map that complements the area.
Well, wait a minute. Before you go any farther, and what we all have to know. when you get water to a certain place, you've got to have so many pounds per square inch. So you're going to have new towers. You're going to have new water towers or water towers, new Horton spheres, new devices to store water, so to fight fires, you've got the water pressure there. So the city, while we think maybe they're only looking at it in one way, has to look at it in a combination of ways in order to have the pounds per square inch to fight fire.
But those towers and things that you're talking
Yes.
about, and if the water's going into the county, shouldn't the county be the one picking up that bill to help development within the county rather than look to the city for some of the infrastructure?
The two need to get together and solve the issue once and for all. The county doesn't do it, the city doesn't do it, and we just keep talking.
And right now, no one does it.
Economic development.
And we heard economic, but I'm going to tell you what, I'm back on the business community. Why don't the business community follow through on it? Why isn't the Greater Hagerstown Committee and the Chamber of Commerce making sure that things are done right? I don't want to see the city have to pay for everything out in the county. It's a county issue. The city's got the water through transmission. Where's that water come from? Up from the Potomac River. It comes through Washington County. So why are we fighting over water coming out of the Potomac River? Because of different ways to get it to the development. The city, the county, and the business community should use that as their #1 priority instead of say, well, what elected officials should we get in to support what we want? Maybe the elected officials need to be telling the business community, this is what we need out of the business community. Bring everybody together to work with the county and the city and the state for the water.
All right, speaking of water, Funkstown has recently announced that they will be raising water rates and property taxes. Henry.
The water rates, they received an increase from the previous mentioned, Hagerstown City, for water. They're passing that on to their city residents and the residents that they supply outside the city. They're actually, it makes common sense. They're putting an additional surcharge to cover for maintenance and upkeep of those lines where they're not receiving any tax revenue from. Going to the other side of the thing, raising the tax rate for the city of Funkstown, right on the heels of Washington County taking it to the citizens of Washington County. I think it's they probably could have postponed doing that or look at better ways to.
Well, they're going to a constant yield, and I think their constant yield is like it was something like 0.36 to 0.3711.
So if the population decreases, what the burden of the taxpayer increases. If the population increases, the burden lessens.
But, well, they still pay it, but they pay more through the assessment,
right,
where now the rate's going up because the assessments are going down in the Funkstown area.
All right. This one's out of the Herald Mail that the county hired recently a third attorney. And what I found interesting about this article is it wasn't until you got to the last sentence or two that we said, oh, well, wait a minute, they had 3 attorneys before, but they're really replacing them and replacing that third attorney. And, I almost felt like they were setting up the thought process is this is a bad thing, but then you find out really it's not an add to compliment, it's just a replacement. Ron?
There's a lot of litigation that the county's going to be faced in the next year,
right,
in the next year and a half, and I think they want to have. I think they were looking not to add that person.
Okay, so when they lost the one attorney, they thought maybe we can deal with that. Well, he moved.
John Matarano went to the Board of Ed.
Right. So they lost him.
Yeah. So he left. I mean,
they lost him.
Yeah.
He's not working for the county anymore.
Just in the county through the school system.
Right, but different job.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that your take on it is that they had hoped not to fill that position, but now they find themselves in a position where they should.
Because if they don't have an attorney with all the legal work that they have facing them in the future,
it
makes a lot more sense to have your own attorney on staff and not going out for another attorney.
What did you get from the article?
One, like you, it wasn't until you get the last couple of paragraphs that it's like, oh, well, we had 3 people. One of the things I picked up was a comment made by one of the county commissioners. Well, because now the Board of Ed has 2 attorneys on staff, why do we need, because we have, it's different issues, okay? Board of Ed is dealing with the educational needs within our community. Washington County government's dealing with not just oversight of the educational needs, which now has 2 people for in-house counsel, but also everything else that falls under the county banner. I think the investment of 3 litigators is beneficial to the county in this regard.
I think as they go through development up at Cascade and different places, that the issues that they face in the future, that attorney's going to be well worth it.
They also mentioned regarding, they were, with only 2, they were focused on the big items, and some of the little items started to trickle down, and you don't want that to represent.
Right. And, and I agree with both of you, and I think the point that was finally made in the article that, and I don't remember one of the commissioners made it or who made it, but the bottom line is it's about return on investment.
Yes.
If we pay this much and we save this much, well, then we can do that all day long. All right. We talk a lot on this show about the advantages and the need for public-private partnerships, but there was an opinion piece in Maryland Reporter that suggested that public-private partnerships are not always great. In fact, they had a pretty stern warning about that. Ron, what did you read out of that?
Oh, I can say there's a public-private partnership.
First of all, what is a public-private partnership?
Well,
Talk us about that.
A public-private partnership can be like dealing with Chief, the Washington County Industrial Foundation. They can serve 2 masters, so it's public and private. And down, with the Board of Public Works voted last week that the new roads that will support the Beltway area will be carried out through the way the governor wants it, through a private-public relationship. And that's how he's going to do it, but money has to come back to do certain things.
So it's
for the roads.
it's essentially incenting private people, private businesses
to get involved,
invest
to
in a
spend
project,
money. But they got to get money.
With the understanding that they have the ability to make some profit back on that investment over time. And and that keeps the investment from the taxpayers lower. And yes, it provides a profit incentive for the private people that invest.
And when you have that, now they're talking tolls on those roads that they're going to build, and those tolls come back to do certain things.
All right.
So it's going to be an interesting concept
and I
on
think,
public-private.
My guess is that those tolls on those roads and that road plan in and by itself is the reason why that stern warning was issued on public-private partnerships.
Do you know what a revenue bond is?
Yes.
So a revenue bond, like in a parking deck. So you use a revenue bond to pay off the debt and not the general obligation of the taxpayer.
Right.
Even though the general obligation of a taxpayer has to support it, the money comes in from the users of, and in this case, a parking deck, in that case, roads.
Right.
Well, one of the things they highlighted in that discussion was the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Right.
Okay. How when it was managed by the state of Pennsylvania, we can make jokes about the potholes and the broken roads but the private partnership really has not improved that system of transportation. And the first investment group, the private group, failed. The state had to repurchase it, and now the tolls to go across the state of Pennsylvania are outrageous. There's no cost control there. Unlike if we go across the Bay Bridge, we know that the Bay Bridge is going to cost us X dollars for us to go across. It has to be approved by Annapolis in order for us to do it. When it's a private company, okay, well, it's going to be $15 today, and tomorrow it's going to be $5, and the next day it's going to be $30. They can raise and lower whenever and however they want to do it. It's not at the benefit of the consumer. And when you were mentioning bonds were the traditional way that we finance these type of improvements that make living in a community better. And that's where I think that this is misguided, and it's not just, a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's an issue that concerns all citizens of Maryland.
Do you think it was brought out because the Board of Public Works just approved it?
Oh, certainly.
I do too. Yeah. All right. Last topic. Mexico may agree to take some asylum seekers. Henry, what say you?
I say ole. Okay. I think that's great.
To avoid tariffs, by the way.
To avoid tariffs.
Right.
Now, am I in favor of seeing tariffs assessed against other countries? when it actually penalizes us as U.S. taxpayers to buy those products? No. But the mere threat of it has finally caused Mexico to come closer in alignment with what good and decent societies do. We watch out for each other's borders and countries and sovereignty.
What are your thoughts on it, Ron?
First of all, that issue was settled. What's been coming up is just a rehash of what had already been done. It's nothing new. It's something that was going to happen. I hope it works.
Yeah. Do you think it will? Do you think it will?
No.
You don't?
No. I just had lunch with a 20-year-old border officer, a special agent, yesterday. He's been there for 2 years. Told me a lot of the stories about what happens along the border, what they have to do. The lack of manpower down there is astronomical. The lack of high professional equipment to drones and that type of thing. How to get into different areas quick and on time isn't there.
So we need more. We need more investment down there.
There's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on this whole border issue that the American public has no clue about.
Okay, but we need more investment. Is what
Absolutely, you need more investment.
Okay, build the wall, make America great again. All right, that's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook. We hope you will follow us on Twitter. We hope you will send your comments, feedback, and suggestions to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com. Most of all, we hope you will join us again next week for another visit to the Flip Side. Good night.